Hello, everyone. Welcome back to live coverage of Eternal Weekend in Prague. I'm here with Skura. We're bringing you all the live action from the Legacy main event today. We have 8 rounds that are behind us. This is going to be round number 9. We have a popular French streamer, Elliot Bissol. I'm sure there are many people in the Twitch chat who are going to recognize him. And we also have Andreas railing. Elliot's playing Dimir Scam, or Dimir Evoke if you want a more family-friendly version. Andreas is playing Storm. He is full-on comboing 4 Besiege the Mirror, Lion Side Diamond, Lotus Petal, Chrome Mox, Dark Ritual, that kind of stuff. Philip, what can you tell us about the Dimir Scam deck? Like, how does the Scam list look in Legacy compared to Modern?
Yeah, the Legacy list has a similar play pattern of turn 1 Grief and then keeping it on the battlefield, but instead of using an effect like an Undying effect, you just reanimate it back into play. So it's much more versatile because you can reanimate anything into play. For example, you can reanimate your own Dotty Voidwalker or Troll of Khazad-dûm that you've cycled. But you can also reanimate an opposing creature. So if your opponent has, cycled their own Troll of Khazad-dûm or maybe discarded a key.
Street Wraith.
Yeah, exactly. You just put it into play immediately and start bashing. So Dimir Scam here with the Grief, with the Reanimate, quadruple Thoughtseize, 4 days and 4 Force of Will, and for Wasteland is going to really keep Andreas and his Storm deck at bay.
So one thing to note is that this is a tournament with closed deck lists. So I was going to ask you what kind of cards you're looking for, in your opening hand. Obviously, the players do not know that this is the matchup. They don't know it's Storm against Dimir Scam. But typically, as the Dimir Scam player, is there anything particular you're looking for in your opening hand, or is this kind of like, hey, in Legacy, you just have so much card selection that as long as you have a Brainstorm, it's all good?
So I really, really want to have that turn 1 Grief because it's both Disruption and a clock. It's exactly the same reason why it's so good in other formats. So that's what I'm looking for, because if you spend time just cantripping, pondering into Brainstorm, you might just die in the meantime. You might not have time for that. And so I think Andres would be happy to see you, spin your wheels. But here I can see land, Lotus, Petal, Double Lead, Cabal Ritual, Infernal Tutor, Besiege the Mirror. That's a stacked hand if I ever seen one. But it's a mulligan to 5, which makes it a bit rougher. Also, as a fun fact from the standings, I can say that one table, the first table, drew actually, and one deck is Doomsday, which we've already seen today, although it's not in Tobiash's hands, and Timur Cascade. So yes, Legacy Rhinos 8-0 drawing on the first table.
Wow, yeah. We have more Doomsday players doing well. It's not just Mark. There's another player with Doomsday at the top table. So good chance we're going to be seeing one of them tomorrow. Looks like the game is finally starting. Andreas, unfortunately for him, is down to 5 cards. But this deck can win, with the right combination of cards. What's the least amount of cards that you need in your hand? With Gaia's Will kind of acting as a Yavimot's Will in this deck, thanks to Besiege the Mirror, is 5 cards enough? You can go Black Source turn 1, double Dark Ritual, then you need Besiege the Queen, obviously, and something to sacrifice. So let's say a Lotus Petal. You'd be able to play Besiege the Queen, you would find Gaia's Will, replay everything, play the Besiege again, and cast Andriel. So I think with a 5-card hand, Andreas might be able to pull it off already. Obviously, his hand was a little bit slower than that, but looks like he is already casting some artifacts here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Elliot is considering forcing this lead, which might happen. He's unsure himself. This is actually another thing. So these Storm decks, these Doomsday decks are pretty tricky, and you have to play them really well. But when you play counter Magic, you also have to know these decks as well to be able to identify if you want to counter something or not. So they force you to know what's up. And so we go lead. We might now go, for example, Infernal Tutor, hold priority, double crack. And this could get nasty. It's the first turn of the game on the play.
Is this the second Storm-ish deck we're going to be seeing in a row, pulling off a turn 1 win?
It's going to be tricky in the face of Elliot's
Force. Yeah.
Elliot's force, because now we will put Infernal Tutor on the stack. Boop. And now, if Andres cracks leads holding priority,
Wow.
and Elliot forces it, that's basically GG.
Yeah, I think Andreas feels like he has to go for it. He mulliganed to 5. He's down on resources. He is playing against a deck that doesn't have a land in play just yet. Chances are it's not a Force of Will deck. Let's just try to go for it.
And the fact that, look at that, the fact that Andres could just threaten an actual turn 1 win off of a mull to 5 is insane.
Wow. Yeah, this is very impressive. I think the Infernal Tutor, I'm not sure how much mana there was floating. I think there was at least 4 black floating, right? So he would be able to find Besiege.
Yeah, but everything has been thwarted. Now, I'm not sure even what Andres is looking for at this point. I mean, he could be making land drops and then try to stitch something together, but yeah, he mulled to 5, but essentially discarded everything. But Elliot still needs to play sharp in order not to get caught by any weird sequence.
Elliot essentially used a Force of Will pitching a card to discard Andreas' entire hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Andreas, has to go for it. This is just something that this is how you play the deck, right? Obviously, there are some situations. If you know your opponent's deck, they're on a Force of Will. Maybe you sequence things differently. But playing against an unknown deck with no permanence in play, I think that's just an easy all in. If you have it, you have it.
Yeah, and unfortunately as well, Andres has got a lot of good cards in the graveyard because he could, for example, draw lead, play lead, wait a bit, top deck another Infernal Tutor at some point, and then try to go for it again. But with double lead and Infernal in the graveyard, the chances are getting slimmer and slimmer.
Elliot with an Orcish Bowmasters in response to the Ponder, so his Orc token gets a little bit bigger, finally gets to start attacking. I think Elliot had at least 1 Force of Will in hand, if not more. So now he just needs to add, maybe 1 more threat into play and attack a few times.
And players are asking in chat whether people play Infernal Tutor even though Besiege is around. Well, Andreas plays 4 Besiege the Mirror, and on top of that, another 4 Infernal Tutor. So he's not slouching around. He's got 8 copies of this tutor effect.
Yeah, it goes really well with the Lion's Eye Diamonds.
We've got a single ad nauseum on top for good measure. Yeah, so Elliot's still trying to play correctly. He doesn't want to misstep. Because, after all, if Andres could win from 5 cards, who knows? He may have been drawing a couple and just win off of 3 with 2 lands already in play. You still have to play sharp. You still have to, just play around whatever way the opponent could have to win.
Oh, it is double force. Wow. Yeah, Elliot has this game pretty much locked up. Like that first turn was just absolutely brutal.
Wow. And
Andreas
now he can
already down on resources and discarded pretty much his entire hand just to 1 Force.
Yeah, Elliot can now play Dotty Voidwalker into Thoughtseize hold up Force of Will. He's just wild.
Do you think if you are playing Legacy, do you just automatically play a Force of Will deck? Like, is it just, the format, you can do so many wild things, so many crazy powerful things. Is playing Force of Will in your deck just something that you kind of just have to do to protect yourself?
Yeah, so if you're not the one playing Force of Will, you have to be the one forcing the Force of Wills, right? Or having
Right.
the best cards possible. So I would either have to play something really busted or Force of Will. Now I think you can combine the two. For example, Mark Tobias has shown us
Mm.
he's playing a Force Days deck, and he's won multiple times within the first 2 turns of the game. So I think that's potentially the best approach. But yeah, I would personally lead on Force of Will, but that's who I am as a Magic player. Always having shields up is nice. Oh my god, grief off the top now.
Yeah, I think Andreas doesn't actually really have anything in his hand anymore. I think there is a Chrome Box. I think that's the secret lair version, and one unknown card. I think yeah, Elliot's gonna cast the grief anyway, just to make sure that nothing can really happen to him with that one Force of Will. He has every angle covered. Yeah, Andreas
Uh,
passes the turn, but he knows that the game is over.
I have to say that out of all the games I've covered in my life as a caster, and that's plenty, in no format have I seen players play until the absolute last moment like I see in Legacy today. Like they actually play until the last point of damage is dealt. And that's almost every single round. So, yeah, just an observation.
All right, so Andreas's Storm deck, you can see that on the screen here. Is that a pretty typical Storm list? Is there anything unusual? I mean, sometimes these deck play versus Saga. It's also nice that you can sacrifice the Saga to besiege the Queen. Like, is it strange that I think all the Storm decks actually we've seen today, I don't think any of them had versus Saga. Is that uncommon? Is that common?
Yeah, so there are just so many different possible Stormlists you could play. There are these two very wild, very well-known archetypes like Tess and Ant. On top of that, you've got Doomsday, which is like Storm-ish at the sidelines. So it really depends because there are these Dark Ritual versions. There are the more red-focused ones with the Red Ritual. Sometimes they play discard more heavily, sometimes less. So it's really difficult to say there is a Storm stock list, which I think makes it that much more interesting because you as a Storm player can adjust and play the way you like, but also as the opponent, you have to keep guessing sometimes because you can try to narrow it down, but in the end, you can't really bet on everything that's going to happen. So yeah, it's difficult to name what's actually stock, and so I think Elliot will try to go with the usual route. I want pressure, and I want some generic interaction. So something like maybe surgical extraction, force of negation, maybe null rod, because he saw like a lead, turn it off, turn off Lotus Petal, turn off Chrome Box. Interestingly, he's got Death Shadow in the sideboard, 2 copies.
Wow. Yeah, that
Which
is interesting. Yeah, maybe just wants another threat for these kinds of Dimir mirrors, Grixis mirrors, Grixis Delver, Shadow mirrors, that type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So okay, we can see the sideboard. Oh, okay. He's still considering his options. Now, it is a wasteland deck, but Storm, this version of Storm can play around it. There is a single island and a single swamp. So you can have access to all the mana if you want, / can. But you have to have all the appropriate fetches.
We have been seeing a lot of null rots in the sideboard, a lot of meltdowns in the sideboard. Is this because the One Ring combo deck, the one with the fast mana, Grim Monolith, Voltaic Key, Manifold Key, is this causing a lot of the players to have that artifact hate in their sideboard, or is there anything else that you typically want to have these cards in the sideboards for?
Yeah, so it's a combination of different decks because when you add exactly what you've said to the 8 casts we've seen already, to Storm, because again, Null Rod shuts off Lead, shuts off Lotus Petal, and some other random stuff in the peripheries, it makes it just a very, very valid card. Because you've got, full on artifact decks, but also decks where artifacts play a key role.
Yeah, as we saw in the previous match, that meltdown was also pretty brutal against the 8 cast deck player with 2 construct tokens and a Seat of the Synod in play. pretty much setting him back to just an Engine Tomb.
Okay, still shuffling. So he really wants to know the perfect configuration, because if he, for example, might want to side in Death Shadow for more pressure. He even has a watery grave
Wow.
in the
Yeah.
sideboard. Yeah. So that's interesting. But I'm not sure you can go that route. So because you're cutting Fatal Push, you're cutting Snuff Out. Most of the other cards are good, honestly. So,
Are
so it's
you bringing in a Watery Grave and cutting a Wasteland? This is not really a deck, or Storm is perhaps not really a deck where you're going to be setting your opponent behind with Wastelands all that much. They have all the ritual effects, Lotus Petals, all that much. Is this where you would consider bringing in an extra blue and black source over a colorless land?
that makes sense to me. It really depends what kind of games devolve into, because base level, this is exactly what you said will happen most of the time. But there will be these kind of slow games where opponent goes like preordained pass, ponder something, and then you'd really want to cut them off of another land. Now, if the opponent just fetches island, fetches swamp, you can't take these, but any subsequent land can be taken, right? So I think we could hedge either way. You could maybe swap out a basic, because you yourself don't really need a basic, so you can do it this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good call. But at the same time, Andreas, he knows he's playing in Scam. He knows it's a Wasteland deck. He has a lot of fetch lands. So first of all, he can start with an island. Second of all, he's the type of deck that's kind of generating all these ritual effects in his hand until he
Wait,
goes off.
wait. So chat pointed something out, and I counted. Andres does seem to have 8 cards in hand. Because I actually hand counted it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, he literally has 8 cards on the play, which is not something you'd like. I mean, you'd like, but yeah, we'll see if we can fix this, because there might be a delay that doesn't allow us to intervene. So I've passed the info on. Yeah, and the info has been passed on to the judge. So, yeah, and Elliot will say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the land in play. Wow.
Wait, is nobody realizing it's 8? Is Elliot also not realizing he's looking at 8 cards?
It's interesting because, if you play so much Magic, I think you can almost feel the weight of 7 cards. And especially when you're looking at your opening hand, like you're used to looking at 7, I think. Like your eyes split it visually into 3 plus 4. I mean, I do 3 plus 4. So it is a funny situation, but it is a 7-1 table. So it is an important case. Yeah, always 4 plus 3. Good. Yeah. 4 plus 3 team.
Now, we started the tournament a little bit behind to, get a little bit of a head start in coverage, make sure we have some pre-recorded matches. We can bring you pretty much nonstop Magic with as few breaks as possible. So I don't think this is currently live. I think we are about 10 minutes. Yeah, I think we're about 10 minutes behind at this point.
Oh, no. Yeah, they counted it. Elliot realized it, I think.
Okay, now it looks like they realized that they're looking at 8 cards. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, these things happen. I mean, it obviously looks like an honest mistake. It is a camera match, but obviously this is up to the judges to figure it out. So the best you can do in a situation like this, raise your hand. Hey, judge, something terrible happened. We can explain exactly what. And looks like Andreas is saying, yeah, I have no idea what happened. I mean, maybe 2 cards got stuck together. I'm not trying to hide anything. I have 8. I lay down 8 cards. None of us realized we were looking at 8 until now. So, what's the fix for this problem?
And sometimes the fix in these situations is that the opponent gets the Thoughtseize effect, we call it. So it's possible that now he will get a Thoughtseize from the rules, then the grief, and then potentially another grief. But had it not been for the grief, they may not have realized it was 8 actually. Because to be fair, if you're playing as an opponent, you're not like actually counting the cards they're holding in hand every time, especially if they're shuffling cards in hand, like I do, for example, regularly. It's difficult to count them. However, my general mannerisms are that I just put 4 and then 3 cards on the table, signaling the number of cards. So yeah,
I mean, but like
players.
this is, I think this is most likely the case of like maybe two cards got stuck together. Even
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
do, even if you do, excuse me, even if you do lay out the 4 and 3, if one of them is stuck on top of each other, you're not going to realize until it's too late. But yeah, it's funny how nobody realized. Andreas didn't realize. Elliot's casting a Thoughtseize, he didn't realize for like 2 minutes. Looking at the hand, he still didn't see that there were 8 cards lying on the table. So what's the fix? Looks like Andreas is shuffling his deck. So I think one card was put back at random. Is that the fix? Which that would be kind of unfortunate if the one random card that gets put back is the Underground Sea, which was his only source of black mana.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, it's either unfortunate random or an Elliot well calculated, decision.
Looks like chat is pointing out that the fix currently might be, and these things keep changing, which is another reason to call a judge. They're going to tell you exactly what the solution is. But it looks like
Wow.
the fix might be that Elliot is the one who decides which
Oh,
card gets shuffled back into Andreas's library. So, like you mentioned, sort of the Thoughtseize fix, as in I'm going to take one card from your hand, I'm going to put it back into your library, and looks like that is what happened. And unfortunately for Andreas, things are going from bad to worse. As after losing game 1 on a multi-5 to a Force of Will, he now gets his only black source shuffled back into his deck. That is brutal. I mean, nobody likes to see that. Obviously, this is unfortunate, but that is very, very brutal for Andreas.
yeah. Thoughtseize again. We see Thoughtseize, Ad Nauseam, Infernal, Empty. It's a really bad hand right now. Like, even if you do top deck a land, it does nothing. So I think Andres is going to be scooping soon enough, and that's assuming he keeps hitting land drops.
But I do like that these kinds of fixes exist. For example, imagine you are the one who notices you drew an extra card or that you drew a sideboard card. There's probably going to be a lot of people who are going to be too scared to call a judge thinking, well, I don't want to tell them that I made a mistake. What if I punish me? What if I get DQ'd, something like that? Well, you still need to be honest. You still need to call a judge, say, hey, I made a mistake. This card should be in my sideboard. I drew it in my opening hand. I messed up. It's my fault. Usually the fix is if you are honest and if nothing really changed, if it's your opening hand, they might be able to fix that for you and even maybe just get you a warning. If you are the one who pointed out the mistake and they're going to be able to fix your deck, maybe you're going to take a forced mulligan, something along those lines, but it might not be as harsh as a game was.
Yeah, and I would even frame it in the opposite way. If you have that mindset and you don't call a judge, this is when
Yes.
exactly it becomes illegal,
A huge
because
problem.
because you're purposefully obfuscating information that would not benefit you. So
That's the worst thing you can do. Yeah.
yeah. So one thing is calling a judge to be honest, and the other is not calling intentionally, which is just a way worse offense.
Yeah, that is basically cheating. And if you're trying to hide, accidentally getting advantage in some kind of way, if you know that happened and you're trying to hide it, then that you're not going to be able to finish the tournament. I can tell you
Yeah.
that.
Okay, Lead off the top. That's one of the better draws, probably. But unfortunately, immediately gets taken. Oh, God, another reanimate, another grief.
Wow.
Trigger. This is just unreal.
Absolutely brutal.
And Elliot says, you may go. And Andres is like, well, I guess I may. And it will end soon enough. Wow. Okay. Attack. Whoa, that is a wild misty rainforest. Attack you for 6, down to 5. Next turn, Elliot wins this match. Can Andres draw anything relevant? So you mentioned that multiple times today, that you might think your hand is trash and then you draw Brainstorm, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, Andres's hand is pretty trash, but if he draws Brainstorm, draws 3 fresh cards, puts the 2 payoffs back on top, which are dead essentially, draws into double lead Infernal Shoot or something, he might actually still have it.
Yeah, there are certainly combinations of cards. Like you mentioned, starts with Brainstorm most likely, and you find double Dark Ritual on top into Besiege the Mirror, something along those lines. There
Yeah.
certainly is a way to try to make that work. Unfortunately for Andreas, have felt like he had to go for it game one. I certainly agree with that. Against an opponent with an unknown deck, down to 5 cards, down on resources. Elliot did end up having the Force of Will, and game 2, an unfortunate error ended up costing Andreas his only black source. So, although to be fair, with Elliot's hand, with his draw, I think even if Andreas was able to keep that Underground Sea, I think Elliot still kind of had all the tools necessary to just take his hand apart and with that fast pressure finish the game before he was able to draw out of it.
Yeah, now we're watching Daniel Perez on lands versus Tristan on Death and Taxes. Tristan, a mainstay on the European tour, right? Circuit of tournaments. We can see him almost every time whenever there is a big European, LMS circuit tourney, whether it's Pioneer, whether it's Modern. And now we're rocking Legacy.
So we have Lens against Death and Taxes. Death and Taxes, most of the people watching are probably already familiar with a white deck full of creatures, utility creatures, cards like Mother of Runes, Talia, Stoneforger Mystic, even some number of silver bullets thanks to running Recruiter of the card. You are most decks in Legacy are trying to cheat on mana, whether by having these pitch cards, Force of Will, these cards like Solitude, Light Grief. Some decks are using Ancient Tomb, Chrome Mox. This deck is trying to cheat on mana by doing it the old-fashioned way with Either Vial, relatively fair stuff. This is as fair as it gets when it comes to Legacy, but there is a pretty high amount of nice synergies and things you can do with this deck, despite running a deck mostly just full of creatures. This deck is running Yorion, and what used to be mostly a mono white deck now sometimes turned into black white, thanks to Orcish Bowmasters just being a card that you really want to play. So it is something that fits pretty well into white. In this case, we have Tristan opting to run mono white, actually, which allows him to run Wastelands, 4 copies of Rishadan Port. So pretty much the good old-fashioned Death and Taxes deck, still featuring cards like Spirit of the Labyrinth. On the other side of the battlefield, we have Daniel Peretz playing the Lands deck. What can you tell us about that? Also, a fairly standard list, I would say.
Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah, half the deck is lands. You've got your Exploration to be able to play multiple lands every turn. Life from the Loam, which is the best, let's say, card to draw spell in the deck. Crop Rotation to get access to any of the multiple lands of utility that you've got between Caracas, Blast Zone, Bojukabo, Ghost Quarter, or the Tabernacle at Pendraveil. You can be pretty disruptive, prisony with Sphere of Resistance. You can also have some Crucible, Lock with Wasteland. There are really multiple avenues to victory with this deck.
Mox Diamond, one of the most important cards for this deck. What can you really do with the lands, right? So like you are playing a lot of lands thanks to Exploration. You do have that prison type of element thanks to Wasteland, thanks to Wasteland, Rishadan Port, and that Sphere of Resistance. Are there any combos in the lands? Like, is there any 2-card combo? I'm looking at Dark Depths. Is there anything else like that you're thinking, okay, you have a bunch of lands, but what can you really do? Bam, here's a 2020. Is there anything else like that?
So that's basically that you've mentioned. Um, there is also Urza's Saga tokens. Now remember, you can always find the missing piece with crop rotation, and you can also buy them back with Life from the Loam, so you can replay them.
Mhm.
Now there are effects that they don't win the game, but they probably lose the game for the opponent. Like for example, the Tabernacle that
Mhm.
really taxes the mana, or maybe Caracas locking the legendary creatures, or Maze of Ith making it impossible for like a Grizzlebrand to attack you. So there are just so many different things that could happen. And yeah, we saw an empty Life from the Loam played last turn just to be able to mill 3 cards and then now play it with some targets. Um, and I
Yeah.
think I see Thespian Stage and Blast Zone milled over.
So Daniel showing us that he does value being able to start dredging, putting some lands in the graveyard, hopefully target them back with the Life from the Loam. Meanwhile, Tristan has a pretty decent draw of his own. Starts on a either Vial on turn one, which is exactly how we want to start the game. That's pretty much your best card on turn one, into a Stoneforge Mystic on turn two. So pretty much the perfect draw for Tristan. I think Daniel is on a mulligan to 5. We'll see if he finds the right pieces to be able to be competitive in this game.
Yeah, Daniel also has double wasteland, but it doesn't do anything in the face of double planes, which is one of the reasons to play Death and Taxes, right? You play land disruption, but you're not affected by land disruption.
Yeah, a 30 land deck with 4 copies of Life from the Loam certainly isn't that scared of a wasteland.
Wow. Lion Sash getting rid of Life from the Loam and
Wow.
wastelanding the green source, preventing another possible Life from the Loam to be cast if there was one. That's brutal. That's absolutely brutal. Okay, so Exile, Boseiju, Untap.
Yeah, I think we've been very fortunate with the feature matches. We saw some very exciting games. We saw a wide range of decks, but in the last couple of rounds, there also have been some very very unfortunate things happening, like a lot of mulligans to 5. But I guess this is a thing with Legacy and Vintage in general. There are a lot of cards that can completely just lock out the opponent from the game. There are turn one kills, so this is just something that's going to happen sometimes.
Yeah, certainly. We also have seen a lot of deck diversity because we started off with a lot of blue decks, but then we actually couldn't possibly see any blue deck because we started the Lorien revealed count, but then there were no decks that we could
Right.
count. Yeah, because there was like Taxes, Stompy, Initiative, Prison. Yeah, now we see lands, we saw depths. So yeah, deck diversity has been really really decent, and I can tell you, Chad, that at the top tables, let's say going down to table like 5 or 7, we've got Cascade, Initiative, Storm, Scam Storm, Shadow, Painter, Cradle, 8 cast, Rag Delver, Mono Black, Rag Reanimator, Post, Double Doomsday. So yeah, I mean, some decks appear in like maybe 2 copies, but in general it's pretty diverse. Yeah.
In the meantime, Tristan puts a Recruiter of the Guard in play, gets a copy of Flicker Wisp, I believe. I think he has 7 cards in hand still, so quietly adding, cards to the battlefield. Very good curve. Meanwhile, Daniel is struggling to make land drops or to do anything of relevance. Obviously, after a mulligan to 5 or 4, in a 30 land deck, there's not that much you can do. I think the cards. What are the cards he's looking for here? Tabernacle could be one, but even then, with either violin play and with lands available, Tristan seems to have that covered.
Yeah, from this position,
Ooh,
yeah.
okay.
So it is Tabernacle. It is potentially the best thing. Oh, Flicker Wisping the Tabernacle.
At the end of
Ah,
your
nice.
turn,
Yeah, that's nice.
now
And
both
he
players are
did.
looking at the wording of Flicker Wisp, which says you are going to get the card back at the beginning of the next end step. So since this end step already started, it's going to exile the card until the end of Tristan's turn. So he can untap. He doesn't have to pay for the creatures. He can keep them around, attack, and cast something else.
Yeah, looking at Danielle's deck list, I really don't think there is much he could do. So I think it's just going downhill from here. And wow, Tristan. So he's got one card that I think he really wants to play, but it looked like Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, a menace from Standards Past. Play it, make an emblem.
Wow.
You know, I've got PTSD just thinking about it. Gideon ruled Magic back then. But now, so it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 damage coming through. So it's not lethal, but it's plenty. Tristan also using the classic deception technique of tapping to the right and lands to the left to make the opponent not know what's actually happening.
And this is the promo copy of Gideon you could have picked up at the regional championship last season. All right, so what is Daniel's plan now? What can he draw? Is there anything?
Yeah, that's the plan. Handshake and Tristan 7-1-1. Potentially fighting for the top 8 if he wins the last one.
Yeah, I believe this was table. Actually, let me look at it. This was table number 13. Yeah, so I think we're roughly looking at X1, maybe X11, depending on how your tiebreakers are looking. If I take a look at this, okay, it looks like we might be able to show you the standings on the screen coming into this round. So that would be round number 9. So that would be standings with 2 rounds to go. As soon as we have them ready, we could put them on the screen. Okay, there we go. So we have Michelle Gasparini on Timur Cascade and Sebastian Siller on Doomsday as the 2 not undefeated but 8-0 players, because there is one more undefeated player, Peter Lobotka, playing Boris Initiative 7-0 and a draw. That there's a bunch of 7-1 players. Yeah, this means that next round we're going to be able to probably take a look at the last undefeated player, or the match between the last undefeated 2 players of the day. And as you mentioned, this is a pretty good variation of decks. We see Timur Cascade, Doomsday, Initiative, 12 Post, Death Shadow, Mono Black Control, Reanimator. There's a Painter deck, Mono Black Aggro, Cradle Control. Yeah, so this is as diverse as it gets, right? 4 color control somewhere there. Timur Delver, Dimir Scam. Is this like 14 different decks?
Yeah, exactly. It's a ton of diversity. Also in the archetypes, in the way they play as well. So I'm really excited to see that. So what if you could just pick, what matchup would you like to see? Which deck versus which deck in a standoff?
That's a great question for the chat. If you have any wishes, something we haven't seen yet. I think from these decks, is there anything we haven't seen from these decks? We did see Painter in one of the matches, right? We saw, I think it was Julian Knopp was on Painter. I think maybe another match of 4 color control, although those matches typically go pretty long and not much is actually happening. Maybe Timur Delver. I think Julian is also, I think, a person whose name I recognize. So we could try to feature Timur Delver, as we haven't seen that on the stream yet. Mono Black Control, I believe, is the sort of mid-range aggro-ish deck.
I think we could also see Danny on Dimir Shadow, because it is actually Shadow. It's not just Scam, it's actually Shadow. So that could also be very interesting to see. So maybe we will be able to... I mean, actually, I would love to watch Shadow versus Ragdelva. This could be an exciting face-off.
Yeah, sounds good. So as soon as the round is paired, which I don't think the round has been paired yet. So for For us, this is going to be the end of round number 9. As soon as round number 10 gets paired, looks like we caught up to the tournament now. We started with a little bit of a delay, but since there are, some delays in the tournament, looks like we caught up, and the 10th round hasn't been paired yet. So we might be able to take a little bit of an extended break here, although we would rather just finish right away. But there's no match we can bring to you right now because, small delays waiting for the pairings. But it might just be 5 minutes, it might be 10. Stick around. As soon as the round gets paired, we're gonna jump right back in, bring you some more matches, and that's gonna be the last round of the Swiss today, followed by the top 8 tomorrow. So we'll be back as soon as the round gets paired. In the meantime, go get something to drink. Don't go anywhere too far. We'll be back as soon as possible.